In my last video, I showed you how to cut your OpenClaw costs from $200 a month down to $20 a month. And today I'm going to show you guys how to reduce that even further by running local models. I'm going to be taking my gaming desktop on my home network and run a large language model in LM Studio over the network and route it directly to OpenClaw. So no API keys, no subscriptions, no sending your data to any company. Now you can run some of your tasks completely locally and privately. Now I'm going to be upfront with you guys. This won't completely replace your cloud models. You're still going to need some cloud models to run some of the main tasks, but using this for a lot of everyday agent tasks, it works tremendously. And this gets the job done for free. Now, before we dive in, let's talk about the hardware that you're going to need. To run a decent local model, you're going to need a GPU with enough VRAM to hold it in the memory. I'd say about 12 gigs of VRAM is the minimum to run a model that's 7 to 9 billion parameter range. Now, that's something like a 3060 or even a 7700 XT. If you've got 16 gigs of VRAM, that would be something like a 4060 Ti or a 5060 Ti, 5070 Ti. You can run some of the same models, but you can run those more comfortably and start experimenting with some of the quantization. And I'll show you guys what I mean by that later on in the video. And for some of the larger models, like the 27 billion or 32 billion parameter models, that's where things start to get really capable. And realistically, you're probably going to need like 24 gigs of VRAM or higher. So like a 3090 or a 4090 or even an AMD RX 7900 XTX. Now, AMD cards will work. They're just not as optimized as NVIDIA. So you're essentially going to be expecting a slower generation speeds on AMD. Now, if you're on like Mac or you've got an older MacBook laying around that is still on the Apple Silicon, so that's any of the M1 to M4 chips, such as the MacBooks, Mac Mini, or even a Mac Studio if you have one, and it's running that unified memory, those are some great options as well to run local models over your network. So even something like a Mac Mini with 24 gigs of VRAM can comfortably run some of these larger models. So today I'm using my system, which has a 5090 and 32 gigs of VRAM, which gives me a lot of headroom, but you absolutely do not need to get a 5090 to get started with running local models over your network. So with all that being said, let's get to it. All right, now first things first, you're gonna need LM Studio. Now, I like LM Studio because it has an interface, and the interface is super user-friendly, and it's very easy to use. Now, if you want something that's a little lighter, you can go with something like Ollama, but it is fully command line based, and I think for the sake of simplicity, LM Studio is the best way to go. So you're going to want to go ahead and download it from this site, and if you have a Mac, there is a Mac version as well. So once you've got that downloaded and installed, we can go ahead and go to LM Studio here. So this is the main page, and let's just go look at our settings real quick. So in terms of your settings, you'll want to make sure that these are set before you do anything. And it also kind of depends on your system and how much RAM you have. But if you're going to be loading the context window into your GPU memory, you want to have this turned on. If you're loading the context menu into your RAM, you want to click that off. And essentially, it just depends on how much VRAM you have and how much system RAM you have. And in terms of a Mac, it's all unified, so it's just a full pool of RAM for like the whole system. You do have to keep that in mind as well. You want to make sure you're not like starving the operating system. Now, next we want to go over to the developer tab. And in the developer tab, we want to actually turn on developer mode. This is going to allow us to use this over the network. And then scrolling down here, we've got on-demand loading for the model, TTL. This essentially will invoke the model when you send it a command. So for example, if you have one of your agents in OpenClaw set up to use the local model and it's not loaded into the GPU yet, or your Mac Mini or your Mac, you can essentially use JIT to auto load it into it. And then here is the max idle time. So if it's not doing anything, it'll unload the model In my case, I set this to 120 minutes. I think the default is like 60 minutes. And then this one here, you want to make sure you enable local LLM services with this checkbox here. And then I think the rest of these are already checked by default, but you can check your settings against mine and change what you need to. And one last thing I forgot to mention is you want to look at your runtime as well. Now these should be set up automatically. It should scan your system and be able to determine like what it needs for your system. But in my case, I'm running an NVIDIA, so I want to make sure I'm using the CUDA 12 here. And I've got the latest version, so we are good to go there. Now, once you enable developer mode, it'll add this tab here, this little tab right here. We want to click on that. And you've got this one here, local server. I want to make sure to start your local server that you go ahead and check that box on there, or that toggle, I should say, and then go into your server settings. And you want to serve this over your local network. This will be off by default, but you want to turn this on. And then same thing, you can turn on the JIT, just-in-time model loading. Set your default here, so you can change if you want it for your server. So in this case, these are the default settings it's pulling from my system settings in the app. And then you can set your server port. Now this is just local, so I just use the default port because I know it's all just being loaded locally over my network. And then the next thing you want to note down is your computer's IP address, which is up in this corner here. So in my case, 192.168.1.5, and then the port 123. And now time for the fun part, the models. So there is a ton of models you can download. You can be I've probably researched hours. I've spent probably actually days looking into this and trying to find the best model. And so far for me, I think the best model I have found has been Qwen 3.5. Now there's a bunch of different versions of Qwen 3.5. There's a 9 billion parameter version. There's a 35 billion parameter version, but this right here, the A3B, that stands for active parameters. So it only has 3 billion active parameters, and then it'll go ahead and search what it needs to within the other parameters if it needs more information. And the one that I really like is Qwen 3.5, and this is the 27 through Unsloth. Now Unsloth is a developer that essentially they have their own version of quantization where they try to make the models more efficient and run a little more efficiently. So in my case, the one that I found that works best with my 5090 is this one here. And this actually shows me the UD, which means that it has that differentiation of the quantization to make it more efficient. So here's all the different versions. Now, when you're looking at all these different versions, you want to keep some things in mind. If you go too small, it's just going to be completely worthless. It's going to hallucinate all the time. It's not going to get things done. It's going to lie to you. You know how that goes. So in terms of quantization, for me, I have found that the Q4-K-M is pretty solid and near lossless quality. Now, I mean, you can look at these and you can see how high they go, but essentially this is just how lossless the model is and how compressed it is. So the one that I found that is the perfect sweet spot for my graphics card is the 19.46 in gigabytes. And the reason I'm going 19.46 is because I am trying to leave myself a little bit of headroom for the context window. Now, the context window in OpenClaw by default is 200K. And in my case, I have adjusted my system in OpenClaw to run at 128K. So it starts compressing at that threshold. And by running a model that's a little smaller, I can actually get that entire context within the graphics card's VRAM. Now, there are some options that you can do to get around this. Like if you don't have as much VRAM, but you have a lot of system RAM on like a Windows computer with your graphics card, you could actually load that into your RAM. Now, it's going to be a lot slower when it comes to the response. But if you're running things like certain tasks, like you're having it generate a report and it's going to take a few extra minutes to generate and it doesn't really matter, then you can 100% utilize your RAM to use that for the context window and the cache. So I've already downloaded this. But once you've picked your model and you go ahead and download it, the next thing you want to do is go back to this models page here. And I've got a bunch of different models. This is the one that I've landed on so far. I really like this model and I've tested out quite a few of them. But you want to go to your settings before you actually load this into your system, and then the load. And in my case, I've set a context length of, in this case, it's showing 131,072. Now that's the equivalent of 128K context window. So I've also maxed out the GPU offload to 64. And then the key thing here is the K cache optimization. Now these are experimental features, but this has to do with your context window. And like I said, the Q4 is near lossless when it comes to retaining your context and it not getting confused. So I've done a lot of testing. I've tried Q8 and then also Q4. And Q4, the difference was pretty substantial with my card. It essentially went from about loading in about 10 gigs into the VRAM down to like 6. So that still gives me some headroom. And then as things start running for longer, the context window will grow and it starts getting closer to the threshold limits of my 32 gigs of VRAM. So back on your local server, let's go ahead first thing and just load the model we want. So in this case, this is the one I want. I'm going to just load that into my VRAM. And I'll bring up my system usage here. And if I go to my dedicated card in my task manager and performance, you can see right here that it is starting to use up all of the VRAM that I have available for my 5090. And that's including, in this case, the context length, as well as the entire model all loaded in. And it looks like it's at about 27.7. And that's out of 31.5. So that gives me a little bit of extra headroom just in case another process decides it needs a little bit of the VRAM. All right, so now we've got that all set up in LM Studio, we can now get the model set up in OpenClaw. Now this is pretty easy to do. I know a lot of people like to use the command line and go into their text files and everything, but for me, I just have OpenClaw do it for me, and it's very simple. You just got to make sure you prompt it right. And in my case, I'm going to have Atlas do it. Atlas is our head coder, CTO, infrastructure, and he is really good. I mean, every single time I tell him, hey, I'll switch this model or switch this agent to a different model, it does it almost instantly. I don't even have to like tell it the full string. I can just be like, hey, switch this to like GPT 5.2 and it'll figure it out. So we're just going to go ahead and do that right here. And one thing real quick I forgot to mention, you will want to copy this entire string when you're adding this to the system. So in this case, it's unsloth/quen 3.5 27b. I'm just going to copy that, and let's go back to my Telegram chat with Atlas. Can you please add a local model using LM Studio? That is very important because it's different if it's Ollama versus LM Studio. This is at a local address. Give it the full information, http://192.168.1.5, and then the port 123. So colon port 1234, and then the model name is, and I just copied that in there. And in my case, I have Atlas set up on Codex 5.3. So it is pretty smart when it comes to like infrastructure and coding and changing config files. So I have 100% faith that Atlas will be able to get this done. And that is the beauty about OpenClaw, is if you need something done, just have your agents do it. Like when I set up Discord, for example, I was spending hours trying to figure it out. And finally I just said, hey Atlas, what do I need to do to get this set up? And it just did it in like 10 minutes. So that's the cool part. So, all right, here we go. Change complete, done. I've added and confirmed the LM Studio model and point it to the local provider of your new host. Okay, make sure all this looks good. So base URL 192.168.1.5, 1234, and then /v1. That stands for the LM Studio version. All right, and we're all good to go there. Now, It's funny. I've done this so many times, it's already like proactively asking if I want to put Nova on this model, because that is my assistant that I use to run all the local models, because Nova runs all the reports in the morning and it saves me a ton of usage on my ChatGPT Plus subscription and also API usage. So he is absolutely right. We're going to put Nova on this model just to test it. Yes, please make this Nova's primary model with GPT 5.2 as a fallback. And that's one thing to keep in mind. You do want to set up a fallback, because if your computer's not on all the time, then all of a sudden your agent's not going to work. You need at least some kind of like cloud model fallback in order to make sure that things are flowing smoothly and that you're not missing reports or any kind of workflow. So I'll give it a second here and it should go ahead and set Nova, which is my, like I said, my other agent. That's our assistant, to configure this. All right, good to go. And one more thing I forgot to mention is if you have your OpenClaw set up as loopback, you will want to change it to 0.0.0.0 so that it can communicate over the network with either your Mac Studio or your desktop running a 5090, because otherwise it's not going to be able to see those on your local network. So just keep that in mind as well. You will need to change that in the configuration. So let's go to Nova here and just do a quick tester. Let's do like something simple here. Hi, Nova. Now let's go back to LM Studio and just make sure it's working. And we can confirm that it is working, because you can see that it is processing in the logs, and there's the processing your prompt right here. It tells you how fast everything is going. So once this fills up to 100, I should get a response. And also once it's done its first prompt, it kind of catches itself a little bit and it'll be faster the next time around. So we got our response. Hey James, how's your Saturday going? Hope your YouTube recording went well today. See, it knows way too much about me already. I'm like, should I tell it we're in the middle of doing the YouTube recording? In the middle of recording the video. Actually, we'll go ahead and say going well. Let's see what it says. And like I said, it should be way faster. So if I go back to LM Studio, yep, see the response already came through because now it's cached some of the context within the GPU's memory. So that's awesome. Hope the recording is going smoothly. I mean, so far so good. Don't let me interrupt your creative flow. Just ping me if you need anything while you're in the zone, with an overwhelming amount of emojis. I told her to use emojis and she kind of like took it to heart. So we got the rocket ship. And anyway, so that is how you set up a local model on your system in LM Studio. And like I said, you can use Ollama, but it is all CLI based. And for me, I tried it on my Mac running it locally, and I was just having all kinds of issues. So I think LM Studio honestly is the way to go. It's got a nice interface, it looks good, and it's super easy to set up over the network. And as you can see, we just set this up in OpenClaw in a few prompts without even having to go to the OpenClaw configuration. So anyway, that'll do it for this video. I'm gonna be coming out with some more OpenClaw videos, vibe coding, agentic AI, stuff like that. So if any of that interests you, consider subscribing to the channel. And as always, have a wonderful day.